leaders of South Sudan, Sudan and Uganda to meet this week to address the Juba peace deal. The latest attack in Mali underscores the deteriorating security situation in the Sahel.
Flooding in Somalia has forced schools to suspend learning. I am Abdulaziz Bilo and I will tell you more about the floods that have displaced over 250,000 people in Somalia.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, world leaders and hundreds of companies head to Shanghai for the second China International Import Expo. And in sports, South Africa still on a winning streak as they scoop top prizes at the Rugby Union Awards in Tokyo. In our top story, South Sudan's government says President Salva Kiir is scheduled to meet President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda and the head of Sudan's Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, this week to try and find a way forward with the peace process. South Sudan's peace deal provides for the formation of a unity government by Tuesday next week. But the main opposition group says it won't be part of that government unless security sector reforms are complete. Well, to discuss the situation in South Sudan a little further, we're now joined here in our Nairobi studio by Matthias Muindi, an independent political risk analyst. Matthias, always a pleasure to have you with us. Now, this tripartite summit, rather ambitious in trying to resolve the issues with the peace deal. What does it hope to achieve?
It is rather ambitious, and when you look at the timing, we don't have so much time before 12th of November. The idea is, when you look at the people who are attending it, Sudan and Uganda, they are very close allies of President Salva Kiir. So this is their last time ditch effort for them to try to convince the President of South Sudan to make some concession, especially on the outstanding issues, security sector reforms, and the element of the number of administrative states in South Sudan.
And of course, the other issue, one of the legalities that's come up, is that the current deal specifically says that Riek Machar in person should be the first vice president. What's your view on how that might be addressed?
That is the biggest obstacle to somebody like Salva Kiir, who has threatened to form a unilaterally form a government. The agreement states very clearly that Machar should be the first vice president, and it also spells out his duties. So President Kiir, despite the threat he has made, he cannot sack or remove Riek Machar from that government without having to resort to destroying the entire agreement.
So considering these major obstacles that are still prevalent and that will have to be resolved, what happens then if a stalemate is not resolved by the 12th of November?
The legitimacy of whichever government will be in office, if it's led by Salva Kiir and does not include Machar, will be raised. And one of the consequences of that will be we could see some relations between South Sudan and some of its external allies, especially from the West, cooling off. Remember, the U.S. has previously threatened to impose sanctions on that government if Machar is not part of it. Another consequence which could come out of if this stalemate persists is that we could see some sporadic violence in sections controlled by the opposition, but it's not large-scale conflict because they are unlikely to have the financial resources to prosecute a major conflict.
Still quite a lot at stake. Thank you so much, Matthias Muindi, joining us here in studio on that attempt to finalize a peace deal for South Sudan. Now, in other news, jihadist violence is escalating in the Sahel as security continues to deteriorate across the region. In Burkina Faso, 4 people, including the deputy mayor of the town of Juba, have been killed. Armed militants reportedly ambushed the mayor's car on Sunday. This is the latest in a series of attacks in the north of Burkina Faso and comes just 3 days after an attack in neighboring Mali, where militants killed more than 50 people. ISIL has claimed responsibility for that attack in Mali and another also in the Manaka region in which a French soldier was killed. The Sahel is now considered the new front line of terror. In response to that rising terror threat, Mali, along with Burkina Faso, Chad, Mauritania and Niger, are united as the G5 Sahel Group, an anti-insurgency force backed by France. Well, for some background on this now, Mali has been battling an insurgency since 2012 when Islamist militants took over the north of the country. But over the last 4 years, there's been a rise in attacks. In November 2015, government declared a nationwide state of emergency. That was after 2 Islamists killed 20 people and took around 170 hostages at the Radisson Blu Hotel in the capital, Bamako. Since then, Mali has experienced regular attacks, which have targeted foreign troops, UN peacekeepers, and its own security forces. CGTN's Thuli Shabalala has more.
There have been numerous attacks in Mali in recent months, some ethnically driven, some carried out by jihadist groups. In March 2019, a group of armed men dressed as traditional hunters attacked the Osagu village in the Mopti region, killing at least 130 people. In April, tens of thousands of people staged a protest in the capital Bamako against rising ethnic and jihadist violence. In June 2019, at least 95 people were killed in an attack on an ethnic Dogon village in central Mali. 38 soldiers died when 2 military camps were attacked near the border with Burkina Faso at the end of September. Due to the presence of various armed groups, Mali's northern and central regions remain unstable. That's despite the presence of the United Nations Multi-Dimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission. In October this year, Mali's Council of Ministers extended the current state of emergency to another year. The third extension will now expire on October 31st, 2020. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
A flood warning has been issued across East Africa as meteorologists are expecting even more rain to hit the region. Rescue teams are currently on high alert as they expect Tropical Storm Kiar to make landfall any day now. Meanwhile, flooding has affected over 1 million people already. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes a look at the worst affected countries.
Heavy rains in East Africa have forced experts and authorities to issue a flood danger alert across the region. In Somalia, numerous people were killed and more than 270,000 Somalis forced to leave their homes, according to the International Rescue Committee. In Kenya, higher than usual rainfall for the month of October has led to flooding and loss of property. The port city of Mombasa recorded more than 100 millimeters of rainfall, a monthly average in one day. In South Sudan, more than 600,000 people have been forced to leave their homes. President Salva Kiir has declared a state of emergency. Humanitarian agencies say the situation in people east of the country is dire. In neighboring Ethiopia, the United Nations says over 120,000 people have been displaced by the flooding. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says several flood incidences were reported in Afar, Oromia, SNNP and Somali regions. At least 1 million people are thought to be affected, and aid agencies say it could get worse due to a weather pattern known as the Indian Ocean Dipole, which occurs when the western part of the Indian Ocean becomes significantly warmer than the eastern part. Across the continent, floods have also been reported in Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Nigeria and Ghana. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Turning to Somalia, which itself continues to struggle with heavy flooding that has left over 250,000 people displaced. Schools in hard-hit areas have been forced to shut their doors while much-needed aid has only just begun trickling in. Here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo, who continues to monitor the situation for us from Mogadishu.
This is one of several schools affected by recent flooding in the central Somali town of Beledweyne. Rising floodwaters has caused cancellation of regular classes and physical damage to schools. Education officials say students and teachers have been forced to flee to higher ground where aid agencies are providing life-saving assistance, including shelter, to more than 250,000 people. It's the second flooding to affect Beledweyne in less than a year. In 2018, floods forced the Ministry of Education to postpone national examinations.
A total of 86 schools have been affected by the floods. More than 27 students are out of school as a result. 700 teachers are also out of work as locals flee to higher ground due to floods in Beledweyne city and surrounding regions.
Health officials say that more than a dozen people died from the recent floods, with others still missing. The country's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo toured the hardest hit areas and promised government support in ending recurrent floods in Beledweyne.
Last year we witnessed a similar tragedy. We hope this will be the last kind of floods witnessed in Beledweyne. We will work with neighboring countries and all relevant authorities to mitigate the crisis and ensure our people don't have to suffer again.
Weeks of flooding has destroyed basic infrastructure in the city. Roads have been turned into rivers, with farmlands destroyed. Locals there rely on farming and livestock for survival. A threat of waterborne diseases remains the biggest fear for aid agencies and local authorities. Humanitarian aid has arrived in the town from aid agencies, the central government and local communities.
We are bringing more commodities as the regular food basket to be able to support up to 2 months the area of Beledweyne and surrounded locations which are flooded and being impacted by the latest climate change.
Authorities say once the situation is restored to normalcy, a task force from Somalia will meet with Ethiopian officials to address recurrent flooding in the region. Shabelle River originates from Ethiopia and passes through towns and villages across southern and central Somalia. Experts say that a lasting solution is now needed to ensure that families are no longer forced to flee their homes. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Kenyan children in remote areas struggle to access education despite the country making significant strides in the sector. And how curvy queens of the Democratic Republic of Congo are redefining beauty norms.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
To Ethiopia now, where a week-long conference on cybersecurity is set to begin in the capital, Addis Ababa. The event seeks to raise awareness and build national cybersecurity capacity. Here's more from CGTN's Girum Chala.
It is the Ethiopian Information Network Security Agency, INSA, which has announced the amount of cyber attacks in Ethiopia over the last 6 years alone has increased by 13-fold. The Deputy Director of INSA, Worku Gachana, said 6 years ago, Ethiopia had faced only 59 cyber attacks. But this year, that number had mounted to 791 attacks. INSA said the largest number of cyber attacks in Ethiopia, constituting around 40% of all cyber attacks, were targeting websites and key infrastructure facilities. Similarly, significant number of hacking attempts were made as well. Ethiopia this week is celebrating an Information Security Awareness Week, which intends to educate and bring on board all stakeholders and the public at large to the issue of cybersecurity. And according to the deputy director himself, most of the cyber attacks take place due to lack of awareness and precautions. The first Cybersecurity Week also intends to exert a coordinated effort towards achieving nationwide cybersecurity capacity. Few months back, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Ethiopia will build a much stronger capacity in its cybersecurity agencies. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Kenya has made significant strides in the education sector. Since making primary school free and compulsory in 2003, enrollment has steadily risen over the last decade. But many children in remote areas still struggle to access education. Here's CGTN's Penina Karibe with the details.
The morning assembly starts things off every morning at Guram Primary School in Marsabit County. It's 8 a.m. and the sweet melody of music fills the morning air. Guram is a word which in the local Rendile language means to move. It's a word that captures the lives of the local pastoralist communities that move from one area to another in search of water and pasture for their animals. The school started back in 2001 with classes being offered under these acacia trees. 18 years down the line, it has made some small strides, constructing 8 permanent classrooms and enrolling 300 pupils. Regina Leitemu is among the 300 pupils. She's in class 6 and on this morning, she's just settling down to begin her classes. However, Regina's day started long before daybreak, at 4 a.m. to be precise. We find her at her home getting ready for school. With no electricity, she has to rely on a torch to get around the house. A few minutes later, she's ready. She carries her firewood, used in school to cook food for the pupils, bids her mum goodbye and heads off into the darkness together with her neighbours. The trek to school is long, 7 kilometers. The journey is fraught with many dangers.
Sometimes on the way to school, we come across hyenas, so we're forced to go back home. The next day when we go back to school, we get punished by the teacher for skipping school.
As the sun comes up in the horizon, Regina and her friends have covered half the 7-kilometer journey. It takes them 2 hours to get to school.
When they come to school, it is very late. When they go to class, they cannot concentrate well because of the tiredness. They are very tired.
Regina braves the day at school and, in the evening, starts the 7-kilometer walk all over again. It's a real sacrifice, but one that is necessary for her to get ahead in life. Her school is the only one in the area that offers upper classes. In 2002, Kenya introduced free primary education across the public system. That saw a huge increase in pupil enrollment. However, in some places such as Marsabit County, access to education still remains a challenge.
The county is the largest in the country, with about 78,000 square kilometers, 800 kilometers from one corner to the other. However, the population also is very sparse because of strategic reasons where people settle, and maybe institutions have been already established in some certain areas, so people choose to walk. But because of resources, again, you cannot be able to provide at every other center.
Now I'm going to show you one of the specimens that we have.
At Bishop Cavalera Girls Secondary School, a biology class is underway. It's a girls-only school, majority from local communities. These are the lucky ones who have managed to break the barriers.
It really means a lot because many wanted to get this opportunity, but they didn't. But I got it, and I'm really proud of it. And I can assure you that I will work hard, and at the last, I'll be successful.
Our main program is to ensure that there's transition of learners from primary school to high school. And with this, we identify kids from poor families who have done well and cannot completely afford high school education.
For the girls, however, settling into secondary school is not easy.
At the beginning, when we are receiving them, the situation is a bit challenging. It's difficult for them. Actually, we have to work a lot in counseling.
As Kenya works towards ensuring access to quality education, many in Marsabit are hoping they will enjoy the fruits of that campaign and be at par with other regions in the country. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Marsabit, Kenya.
The 8th edition of Congolese Fashion Week has concluded in the capital Kinshasa. The event brought together stylists and designers to showcase their work. And for the first time, the event included plus-size women who took to the runway. CGTN's Chamgono has more.
Designers and stylists flaunting their creations during Congo's Fashion Week. This was the highlight of the event. Under the theme, Congo with Style, for the first time, the runway was graced by plus-size women.
My collection is called Silhouette, as you have seen. I wanted to show the graceful shapes, the beautiful shapes of our African women. The glamour, they were voluptuous, very, very pretty. So that's what I wanted to show. That's what inspired me, the beautiful shapes of our African women.
Organizers of the event say the presence of plus-size women owning the catwalk redefines beauty.
It was time to celebrate the woman. I don't call large, but I call the generous woman. We needed to celebrate the woman who is generous in her form. We needed to celebrate it properly.
And for the models,
it's the first time I've ever seen a catwalk. It's really nice to see that we are being included, that we are not being left out.
In the end, the standard of beauty that we wanted to keep so much with thin and tall women. They do not represent all women. We are diverse. We all deserve to be represented.
The Congo Fashion Week has been promoting fashion entrepreneurs in the DRC since 2013. In 8 years, the event has influenced the perception of business in the country's fashion scene. Chamwono, CGTN.
Now, while for the DRC, this may have been the first time the country has held such a high-profile plus-size beauty pageant, but elsewhere in Africa, there have been numerous pageants and drives and campaigns to redefine beauty. Let's take an in-depth look at this topic, and for that, we're joined in studio by Dr. Ken Nwoko, a sociologist and lecturer at the University of Nairobi, and Sarah Mukubana, a social media influencer who is also known as Plus Wanga Princess. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me in studio. Sarah, let's start with you. You know, there's this perception that in Africa, big has always been beautiful. Big is beautiful. But in your experience and in your view, do you feel that there is genuine appreciation of plus-size bodies in Africa?
Yes, there has been a genuine appreciation for us, but it's been stereotyped to a role we play in society. We've always been seen as the mothers, the aunties, but now we want to be the CEOs. We want to see ourselves in advertising, in fashion, in the beauty industry. And it's only plausible for that to happen because we account for 68% of the retail shoppers. So of course we want to see ourselves in marketing and everywhere else. Yeah, and represented. Yeah.
So bringing you in there, Ken, I mean, we know that, as Sarah says, there has been some appreciation for plus-size women, but African women don't live in a vacuum. We are influenced by images that come from all over the world. So in your view, how important is it to redefine beauty standards around the world, in particular for women in Africa?
I think that's one thing that we are still proud of in Africa, that we've held on to that concept of the fact that the African woman has always been and will always be, you know, bigger, better. And even when we watch all these things about the skinny model from the US, from the UK, the African woman has hardly been affected by that, except the newer generation tried to ape that a while back, and I think it went out of fashion. And that's why I say, as a continent, Africans are still very proud of the plus-size woman. And right now, the beautiful thing about it is that we are exporting it out there. And if you look into social media, if you look into magazines, the curvy woman is now displaying herself without a problem.
Well, then bringing in the social media influencer, how is it that you're taking this new definition of the curvy woman into social media, and how is it being received?
I mean, we are definitely getting an outpouring, especially from other women, because I guess they are the ones who really understand the plight of struggling with self-image, struggling with deciding or accepting yourself and loving yourself and gaining self-confidence to be who or whatever you want to be in society. However, maybe I would say on the ground it's a little different because I mean, not everybody has bought into the idea because we're still so heavily influenced by Western media, which is skinnier is better. But there's definitely a growing perception, even when it comes to the numbers. When it comes to shopping in anything, we accounted for an increase in 17.8% according to the Placket research. But there's still so much to be done because that doesn't begin to scratch the surface. Even just in general society accepting each other, greater confidence means better people, more productive people, just a better society in general.
Indeed. And Ken, bringing you back in here now, is there a thin line though between promoting sort of body confidence around curvier bodies and perhaps risking that we're encouraging people to be unhealthy or live unhealthy lifestyles?
You know, they always say the traditional thing has always been that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. But if you think about it, beauty is actually responsive, that you look the way you want society to see you, not the way you feel you should be. And that's why a lot of times we have problems with the self-concept. You start thinking, I'm too big, I need to hit the gym. And then you whack yourself silly in the gym, trying to, you know, look like what everybody else wants you to look like. So in a way, right now what's been happening is that the woman, the African woman especially, is regaining her place, her confidence in filling that space. That space has always been left to be decided for us on our behalf by the Western media, by Western values. And we had this, you know, the skinny woman on the runway, which in Africa is totally unacceptable because you almost look anorexic, you know, and we keep thinking we need to have that woman feed a little more. Yeah, so things have changed. And if you think about it, the younger people who are coming up today, just look at photographs. Every time you see a woman on Instagram, on Facebook, they must show you their backside. They must show you their, you know, and that tells you that we are actually walking away from those values. And those values have always guided, especially men are hardly affected by those things.
Well, I actually wanted to ask that. I mean, to what extent do you think, you know, you talk about beauty being in the eye of the beholder, but to what extent have men played a role in shaping what that beauty standard essentially is?
Now, that's the responsive part I'm talking about, that you know, if you think about it, the feminine mindset, the woman's psyche, is usually to respond to male values, male standards, which has always been one of the things those of us who speak for the women have always said, no, don't do that. Do you, be you. And so half the time, the men will ogle. You know, they'll look and say, whoa, and then you pass by and they don't say whoa, and you feel, oops, you know? So a lot of times, the female mind has always been responsive to the male standard. And that is now changing. The woman is saying, this is me, and you take me or you leave me.
Indeed, redefining ourselves. Thank you so much, very much, Dr. Ken Okwo, and of course, Sarah Mokobana joining us here in studio.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow, and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, the global ratings firm Moody's has given South Africa 3 months to deliver a credible plan to stabilize its finances and tackle the risks posed by its state-owned enterprises. Failure to convince Moody's of an upturn in South Africa's economy could result in a further downgrade. Moody's left South Africa on the brink of junk status on Friday, revising the outlook on the economy's last investment-grade credit rating from stable to negative. The negative outlook means South Africa may have 12 to 18 months in which a downgrade could be delivered, but it could come even sooner if Moody's is not impressed by the fiscal picture presented at the next budget statement in February 2020. The Finance Ministry has responded, saying the country does have a narrow window to demonstrate faster and more concrete implementation of reforms. Now, Saudi Arabia officially started the IPO process for its oil company, Aramco, on Sunday. Shares in the world's largest oil producer are likely to start trading in Riyadh in December. The Saudi government has conceded the company probably isn't worth the $2 trillion valuation Prince Mohammed has long advocated. It is aiming for a valuation of between $1.6 trillion and $1.8. Research by the banks involved in the company's initial public offering revealed that Saudi Aramco may be worth as little as $1.5 trillion or even less. Aramco's net income last year of $111 billion made it the most profitable of any corporation globally, more than Apple, Google's parent company Alphabet, and ExxonMobil combined. The company has pledged to pay a minimum of $75 billion in dividends, leaving it vulnerable to a downturn in oil prices. The second China International Import Expo, or CIIE, kicks off in Shanghai from November 5th to the 10th. World leaders will attend the opening ceremony as well as other events at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. French President Emmanuel Macron will visit China on Monday, his second visit since he took office 2 years ago. Serbian Prime Minister Ana Brnabic and Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness arrived in Shanghai on Sunday. Serbia is the first country in Central and Eastern Europe to establish a comprehensive strategic partnership with China, while Jamaica has been designated a guest of honor at the CIIE. Now, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is also sending representatives to the CIIE in Shanghai. Its chief says the expo promotes trade and is a model for the world.
China is opening up to a wide range of countries and saying we can push back against protectionism. That's an important statement. This action is a demonstrated statement that the future of international relations is based on mutually respectful engagement with others, not building walls around ourselves. Beyond the Import Expo, you have different things, state-supported by financial institutions, underwriting infrastructure projects in many parts of the world, business linkages and engagements, and bold initiatives like the BRI. These are steps in a consolidated statement that we belong to the world, we belong together. And I think this is the spirit of the Shanghai second Import Expo. Represent an ambitious program of relating with others, stretching out to integrate with others. A lot of work we do in areas of West Asia and Central Europe and Eastern Europe, around Caspian Sea and such neighborhoods. And many of the countries from that region, they are all looking at how the Belt and Road Initiative is linking them to the world.
Now, at this year's Expo, 206 companies from 43 African nations will showcase their local products at the exhibitions. For those attending, the CIIE will not only be a good opportunity to open up the Chinese market, but also promote their own growth and development. Among the products on offer are African wines, Ethiopian coffee, Egyptian handicrafts, Tunisian olive oil, and Zambian honey. Countries and businesses with special tourism resources such as Egypt, South Africa and Kenya are also expected to sell specially designed tourist packages for Chinese tourists. For those who did not attend the expo last year, it's being seen as an opportunity to gain direct access to the Chinese market. One local tea merchant in Kenya says companies from Fujian province have signed an order to purchase 60,000 kilograms of his green tea and are committed to working with him to build a model factory. Now, in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has extended the closure of Nigeria's border with neighboring countries to January 31st. Land borders with countries including Benin and Niger have been partially closed since the 20th of August, a move that was meant to curb the smuggling of large quantities of rice and other commodities. Now, according to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, the blockade has had a ripple effect across West Africa, with factories and traders struggling to import key raw materials and having to use alternative routes for their exports. Meanwhile, Nigeria has improved its ranking in the latest World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. Africa's largest economy now ranks 131st. That's up 15 places from last year. But exactly how much easier is it to do business in Nigeria? CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam finds out.
Yahaya Abubakar runs a printing company in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. And for the past 10 years, he's worked hard to keep it afloat. In spite of costly printing equipment, Yahaya had projected a massive expansion by now. But there have been challenges.
One of the bottlenecks, as we all know as Nigerian, has been the problem of power, energy. It has been hindering the smooth flow of the business. And another challenge again that we are facing has to do with the easy accessibility of loans. The interest rate is too on the high side.
The government in 2016 launched a presidential council to develop reforms that will ease business operations in Nigeria. Since then, the country has seen a steady rise altogether, moving 39 places up on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business ranking. More simplified business registration processes and an immigration policy of visa on arrival have encouraged foreign investors. Development economist Isaac Botti has been closely watching the Nigerian business environment. He believes the reforms are good, but so much more would be required to have significant impact on businesses here.
Currently, our level of industrial production is at minus 10%, which simply shows that Nigeria is not moving forward in that regard. What about manufacturing? Currently, our level of manufacturing production is at 0.40, which also shows that not much has been achieved. So all that tells us that despite the claim that it's easy to do business in Nigeria, we are not seeing any significant improvement.
Business operators like Yahaya are hopeful for a more favorable environment, and that translates to better interest rates, improved infrastructure, security, and electricity supply. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Apple is getting into another new market. On November 1st, the tech giant launched Apple TV, its own streaming service and original content. Reporter Mark New has the details.
Some say sight was taken from them by God.
Apple has attracted Hollywood stars like Jason Momoa, Jennifer Aniston, and Steve Carell to star in its original productions. At $5 a month, the Apple TV Plus streaming service is being considered by Fabian Santos, who already subscribes to Netflix and is eagerly awaiting Disney's new streaming service.
I'm an Apple user, and I saw some of the trailers. Everything looks very good, but if you get all the services, it's going to be a lot of money. So you have to choose the services that actually got more to do with you.
There's only 9 shows, and people are used to a much wider variety of choices. So it's going to be interesting to see how people react. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of initial excitement, but how quickly people fade from that is the real question mark.
The lack of content is a major disadvantage as Apple battles market leader Netflix and Disney Plus, which launches November 12th. But Netflix started its own original content 6 years ago, and Disney has its extensive library of family shows, and of course the Marvel superheroes and Star Wars franchises. But with a reported budget of $6 billion, Apple TV Plus has more in store, like shows from celebrity icon Oprah Winfrey and director Steven Spielberg on the way.
They're spending a lot of money on these shows. It's definitely a risky bet. I mean, you know, this is like the music business, the old days of the music business. It's kind of a, you know, you can get a hit, but you may not.
But Apple does have some advantages. It has devices in the hands of more than 1 billion users who, with a few taps, can start watching Apple's shows almost instantly.
A lot of people think this is going head-on against Netflix or Roku. It's not. This is an and strategy. It's a content strategy. Most people are going to subscribe to, at most, 3 streaming services. They're not trying to replace like every single movie known to mankind, or I've got, you know, a TV studio that's got an entire library that they want to recreate. They're part of a system where they're one content channel within the Apple TV family.
Apple TV Plus also adds a powerful tool to its arsenal of services. Many users wonder if it will eventually wrap its iCloud storage, Apple Music, and Apple TV Plus together for one low price.
There's a lot of questions as to when they'll bundle those services into a bigger package, or to family plans, or to sharing types of plans for groups. I think that'll happen over time. Apple traditionally takes a very cautious approach. They launch a product, they see how it does, and they figure out when it makes sense to cut over to the next price point.
If they bundle Apple TV Plus together with iCloud and Apple Music, all for one cheap price, would that be more attractive?
It's very tempting. I could even consider changing from Spotify to Apple Music because I'm a Spotify user. So if they actually make like a whole package like that, it's very tempting for sure.
Santos was even more tempted when he found out about an Apple promotion to lure new customers. Buy any new Apple device, and it comes with a 1-year Apple TV Plus subscription for free. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Now let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Spreading the sweetness of honey, beekeepers showcase the benefits of honey products at a Cairo festival.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Egypt has held its first honey festival with about 120 companies from 6 countries. Egyptians are among the lowest consumers of honey in the world, but with this event, beekeepers are trying to market the numerous benefits of honey products. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhri has more from Cairo.
A study on Egyptians' consumption of honey has shown that citizens consume just 200 grams a year. In comparison, Europeans consume 10 times that amount. That has encouraged honey producers here to create the first honey festival ever.
I love
the fact that we have a festival. There are countries which produce much less honey than we do, yet they hold such festivals annually. What we aim for is to hold it all over Egypt and not just in Cairo.
With more than 100 million citizens, the potential honey and its products have in the market are encouraging. It's what has attracted foreign producers to join this first-of-its-kind event. Egypt's newly born festival aims to introduce the different kinds of honey to consumers and create awareness about their nutritious values.
We are trying to make people move away from using chemicals and turn to natural remedies, to resort to the power of nature to get better and stronger. It's the first time we join this festival. We must promote honey as a main nutrient, not as a substitute.
We are trying to boost the trust between producers and consumers. It's an opportunity for consumers to get to know the different kinds of honey and their benefits. Egypt produces over 9 kinds of honey, among them herbs, dessert, and banana.
Because of its limited domestic consumption, Egypt has plenty of honey to export. Most of these companies export to Africa and the Gulf. To reach Europe, however, there are stricter requirements.
Not all honey products get approved for exportation to Europe. It must be organic, no chemicals used in the hive, and no chemicals used in the fields where the bees feed. Europe tests the honey for chemicals. Companies in Egypt are certified to export to Europe.
Because of its warm weather, honey here gets collected earlier than most countries in the world. Egypt produces around 35,000 tons annually. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Coming up in your sports news. South Africa still on a winning streak as they scoop 3 rugby union awards in Tokyo.
How would you create your legend? On the field.